Mom's dream. Mom's dream begins with Dad's funeral. And my dad's funeral started wrong and it ended wrong. It was just plain wrong. And as we drove away from the gravesite, there were men lifting the casket into the ground. And I turned and I looked and looked and looked as long as I could. My aunt said it best, my favorite Aunt Henrietta. Sam should have been buried with loving hands. Her voice was full of disdain and disappointment. She was right. Well, it seemed just seconds before, minutes really, that we were standing in the chapel. Whose chapel was it? And there was some man who was leaning over my father's casket and intoning platitudes about my father or some other person he didn't know. Certainly this person was from Rent-A-Rabbi, which fate befell my family because we were not affiliated with a synagogue and didn't have our own rabbi. And then, moments after, there was a snake oil salesman at my elbow. It was the funeral director. Now, you don't really want these older people to be standing out in the drizzle, and it's getting cold now, do you? Well, I felt a scream rising, but I stifled it. I caved. I said, okay. I didn't really think it was cold in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That's how we missed putting my father to rest with loving hands. My mother held up pretty well. I did not succeed in my role as daughter. This was like some D.H. Lawrence movie. All the elements were practically there. The mourners, that was us in somber clothing, and a little sniffling, not much, but usually in the movies. And you know the movies are never as good as the book. Certainly this movie wasn't. The mourners would be sniffling and snuffling, and there would be some nervous laughing as they approached the grave site with the casket. Everyone becoming undignified in the face of death. Well, that didn't exactly happen. And my aunt, my other aunt, could have played the role of the spinster aunt or the widowed aunt who was standing in the corner, filling her face with chocolates so as not to feel the magnitude of this event. We piled in the car. We were already driving away, and we went to my mom's condo to sit Shiva. Now, this is a lovely tradition in the Jewish religion where people basically come to your house for a week and take care of you and bring you all kinds of food and love. And at least there, the scent of the savory foods and the smell of the sweet flowers overtook that aroma of pent-upness that I felt I had to scrape off me from the funeral home. And my aunt almost rose to the occasion, my Aunt Eva, my other aunt, and she stopped short of total recriminations, but she did start with, how did my little brother Sam get so sick? And where was Mindy? We don't put our people in nursing homes. But she stopped short of the poison pen letters she used to send to my mom that I used to file away. You're a spendthrift. You're ruining my brother. You spend too much money. She stopped short of that. I looked at her. She looked so frail and worn and as fragile as bone china. I think I forgave her. I forgive her. Well, I went home to embark on my re-education journey. I was going back to college. I was 33. Fast forward here, a couple of years. I knew my mother had not been to see my father's gravesite at the cemetery. It left a bitter taste in her mouth, and she didn't have a car anymore. And I came to visit in Fort Lauderdale, and we set out. And before that, she told me, your father comes to me in a dream I've had several times. And he says, Reg, where am I? People ask where I can be found. They don't know where I am. Please tell them. So I gathered up all the papers, all the paid receipts for the rent a rabbi, for the snake oil salesman, for the grave marker, for the grave diggers, and the casket and the flowers. And was I girding my metaphorical loins for a battle? Well, perhaps. We went out in the boondocks to the cemetery, and we went into the office. I was clutching my file folder, and the woman there smiled, and I smiled. My mother was right beside me, and I asked her to look for the gravesite of Samuel Donner, and she opened the file drawer, and she looked inside, and looked inside. No, she couldn't find anything. And then she looked at the war map above her head that was speckled with red push pins denoting grave sites. I stood up on my toes and I looked. And then she looked and looked. And finally she had to admit, I cannot find your father's gravesite. I pulled myself up very straight. Please have one of your people take my mother and I to a place that has room enough for a grave marker, a small headstone, and have someone meet us there with an unmarked headstone. Now, please. We were picked up by the ubiquitous mode of transportation in South Florida, which is a golf cart, and we went to some lone place in the cemetery that had just enough room for one gravestone. And yes, someone met us with a gravestone, and we picked it up and we put it down on the grass. It was a green grassy day, and sunny, not drizzling at all, and the grass glistened, and, well, my mother sat down on the grass and began to cry. I said to these people, you will inscribe the marker, the headstone, with the name of Samuel Donner, SAMUELDONNER. Thank you. I picked my mom up from the grass and I said, Mom, if you ever have that dream again, you tell Dad we know where he is. He is right here. You tell him that. And we left, never to return to that cemetery. And my mom never had that dream again. Now, I don't know if this were a harbinger of her dementia yet to come, or if she were seeing into the super sensible. But I do know that I took a giant step in becoming the daughter that I wanted to be. Thank you.